Hello there. I'm Robert Martinez, state historian of New Mexico, and this is New Mexico History in 10 Minutes. I just want to say a couple things before I get started to clarify. I've had some questions come my way. First of all, the Visigoths who came into Spain in the 400s, they were Germanic barbarians. They came out of what's now Germany, France, that part of the world, and they spilled over the Pyrenees Mountains, a huge mountain range that cut Spain and Portugal off from the rest of Europe, essentially. And they came in the 400s, and they were brought with them, they were carrying, you could say, Arianism. That is not the same thing as the Aryan movement of Nazi Germany in the 1930s and the 1940s. No, it's very different. This was a Catholic heresy, a Christian heresy taught by a priest named Arius. And what he said was that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, is God, but not completely God, not totally God. He's kind of God, and there's a time when he wasn't. He's not eternal. So this is a heresy, and this is the version of Christianity that was brought to Spain in the 400s. Eventually, the Visigoths converted to Orthodoxy, but that's where we get this idea in the creed, credo, I believe, that's what it means in Latin, the creed that all Christian churches say, and it's essentially the idea of who God is and what Christians essentially are supposed to believe in. If you've heard it, it goes something like, I believe in one God, the Father Almighty. But when it gets to Jesus, it says, God from God, light from light, and if you didn't get it that time, true God from true God, begotten, not made, consubstantial with the Father, of the same substance as the Father, equal to the Father, the same. This was the Council of Nicaea in 325, really just hammering the point against Arius and his movement, okay? So that's where that comes from, and that's the movement that was in Spain, okay? So let's talk about Spain in Mexico. What's going on there? Let's remember, Spain had a 700-year conflict between Muslims and Christians, between Islamic people and Catholic people. And after 700 years of blending and coexisting and fighting and loving, in 1492, Spain says to the Jews and Muslims of the area, you either convert to Catholicism or leave. They had their reasons, probably a little harsh for us these days, but I like to tell people, please be careful not to judge our ancestors too harshly. It's like going to a foreign country. They did things differently over there back then. And the Catholics were afraid that the Jews might bring the Ottoman Muslim Turks into Spain. And whether that was a correct assumption or not, we don't know. But bottom line is Spaniards wanted to consolidate under one flag, and that flag was Spain, and that flag was also Catholicism. So once the Muslims were defeated at Granada in 1492, the Spaniards were on a roll. Think about the United States in the 1800s with manifest destiny, the idea that God chose the United States to reign from sea to shining sea. Well, the Spaniards invented it first, okay? What they thought was that God had chosen them because of their victories over Islam to rule the world, essentially. So by the time they get to Mexico, a generation after Columbus, they're on a roll, and they steamroll through the Aztec Empire and the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan. Can you say that? Tenochtitlan. Okay. Well, keep in mind, the first 15 years from about 1519 to 1535, this is the era of the conquistador. This is when Cortez and his soldiers, they are getting land, they are being assigned Indians to pay them tribute, they are extracting mineral wealth, gold, silver, and they're becoming very wealthy. And with that wealth, there's a lot of power, okay? So keep that in mind. There's also the presence of the Roman Catholic Church. The religious orders were very much Catholic, and they were ruled by the Pope in Rome, but they were very competitive and they could be quite different. You had Augustinians, you had Franciscans, Dominicans, and the order that got to Mexico first were the Franciscans. So they kind of held sway there. They had first pickings of who to convert, who to work with, and where to work, and where to establish themselves. And eventually Augustinians came, and Dominicans, and then later Jesuits, the Society of Jesus. But they're established in 1540 by Ignatius of Loyola, Inigo de Loyola. And think about how we Americans are about football. Who's your team? Oh, the Dallas Cowboys. Or really, who's your Denver Broncos? Oh, my team's better than yours. Think about that. Just go back to the 1500s, and that's how it was. Oh, go Franciscans. No, I'm for the Dominicans. I hope those Dominicans really kick the Franciscans' butts when they get to South America. Well, that's kind of what it was like, and the Franciscans are there first. And that era of the conquistador that ends in 1535, it results in Hernan Cortés being taken back to Spain in chains under arrest. This was a method that the Catholic monarchy used a lot. Let's remember, the Catholic monarch was sovereign, in other words, absolute. And if you went against the king, the queen, or showed any sort of assertive power, they would rein you in and take care of that real quick. They did it with Columbus. Columbus wasn't just praised for conquering the Americas or mistreating Native Americans. He made a few expeditions to the Caribbean and explored the coasts of Central America and that part of the world. But he was arrested and taken back to Spain and punished. And that happens to Cortés, and we'll see it happens later in New Mexico. But nevertheless, during this period, you have Franciscan priests coming and attempting to convert the Native American people who are really not that interested in trying on a new religion or getting rid of theirs, even more importantly. They would take on other people's religious views and mix them with their own if it made sense to them. But we need to look at the cult of Guadalupe. Guadalupe is a devotion to the Virgin Mary in Extremadura, Spain. No doubt a lot of those first conquistadores were devoted to Our Lady of Guadalupe in Spain, Nuestra Señora de Guadalupe. But the story goes that Our Lady appeared in Mexico at Tepeyac, right outside Tenochtitlan, the city of Mexico, in 1531. The bishop at the time was Fray Juan de Zumárraga, first bishop of Mexico, a Basque, who was also an inquisitor. He had inquisitorial authority in Mexico. There was no inquisition there yet. But what happens is an Indian, Juan Diego, claims that Our Lady appears to him, and when he finally brings proof, which is his tilma, that's his sarape or robe that he wears, and it's filled with Castilian roses in wintertime, which would have been a miracle anyway. When he throws the roses down, there's an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe who appears as a Native American girl. Okay, so this was important because this means that the new religion isn't just for the conquerors, it's also for the mestizo people, which are starting to grow, that population of half Indian and half Spanish, and for the Indians, okay? Because these people needed hope. Go back to that initial conquest and think about this. The Spaniards have about 400 men with them. Not a lot. The Aztecs could have wiped them out, but the Spaniards also had allies, Tlaxcalan and Cholulan, Indian allies. They also had certain advantages. They had horses. The Aztec native people had never seen horses, so this was very freaky to them. And the men were wearing armor and they had steel swords, other weapons that they didn't have. They had clubs with obsidian rock, very formidable, but a sword could just cut through a human being, cut off limbs. Very dangerous weapon. They had the Spaniards had gunpowder. They had cannon. This was devastating. But probably even more significant was the fact that the Spaniards were carrying germs. They were carrying disease. The Spaniards didn't know it. It wasn't germ warfare like we know today. They weren't deliberately bringing disease. They had it. They had things like influenza, measles, smallpox, and people in Europe had died of those diseases, but they had developed immunities over the centuries. Well, the Native Americans did not have these immunities. So imagine the psychological devastation when you look around and your people, your family members are dying of these diseases, but the conquerors are not. Probably makes you question your rulers, your religion, everything. So these were the advantages that the Spaniards had. So by the 1530s, the Franciscan priests were having a tough time converting the Native Americans. But the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe, it comes down to that 10,000 natives converted because of Our Lady, not necessarily because of the Franciscans. And that story comes down, and it leads us to the year 1535, which is the end of the era of the conquistador, and this is the start of official Spanish government. The king will send a viceroy, a virrey, a vice king to rule, a ruling body called an audiencia, like a parliament. The church, the Catholic Church, will be there in force, and then we'll see the start of La Inquisición, the Inquisition. Hasta luego.